What's going on, everybody? It's Blandon here again. Welcome to part 3 of our 6-part series to new builds. In this video, I'm going to share with you how much deposit do you actually need, how much can you borrow from the bank, and finally, how to get pre-approved for a new build. So firstly, how much deposit do you actually need? There are 2 occasions where you need to put up some money. The first occasion is when you declare unconditional. What does this actually mean? The usual process when you buy a new build is you need to sign a contract. The contract allows you a certain period to do your homework on the property. And after you've done all of that, you decided you want to go ahead with the property, you declare unconditional on the contract. Once you've done that, you need to pay a deposit. Unless you negotiate, this is usually at 10%. So I would advise always to negotiate this down to just 5%. This will give you better utility on time value on your money. Or simply put, you just need to commit less money up front. Now, the second occasion where you need to put up more money is when the CCC is issued, or Code of Compliance Certificate. This is when the property construction has finished and the council has issued the legal documents for you to go ahead with that property. Now, depending if you're buying as an own-occupied or an investment, the remaining deposit that you need to put up will be slightly different. For own-occupied, you can go as low as 10% deposit. Now, this is including the 5% that you have already put up front when you have declared unconditional. Now, do keep in mind, if you go in with less than 20% deposit on any deals, the bank will charge you what we call a low equity margin, either in the form of a higher interest rate or a fee up front when you settle the property. To find out which one's more suitable for your deal or your current situation, you can talk to a mortgage advisor. If you're buying the new build as an investment, you only need 20% deposit. Now again, this is including that 5% that you have already committed up front. This is because new builds have LVR exemptions. So unlike existing investment property where you need to put up 40%, on a new build, you only have to put down 20. So the second question that we're answering is, how much can you borrow for a new build? All major banks use a very similar calculation to work this out. It is dependent on how much uncommitted income you have left over after all living expenses are considered. Incomes include things like your salary, or if you're self-employed, what's the net income, and also potential rental income that you have. For expenses, there are living expenses that the bank will basically average out depending on how many people are in your household. And on top of your living expense, they add what we call a fixed commitment. So things like your childcare expense, your insurance, those are all other fixed commitments that the bank will add on top of your living expenses. So in summary, your income minus all of your expenses, whatever's left over is uncommitted income that the bank will use to calculate how much mortgage you can service. Now, the biggest discrepancy or biggest misunderstanding for clients usually is to do with the mortgage repayment calculation. How the bank sees it and how the client sees it are completely different. Based on the current interest rate, around that low 2%, you're going to quickly figure out that mortgage repayments are very cheap at the moment. However, when the bank calculates how much you can borrow, they will always add a 3 to 4% margin on top of whatever the interest rate might be to stress test whether or not you can pay for that mortgage if the interest rates were to rise. And also keep in mind, if you are looking for interest-only loan, the bank will still use a principal and interest repayment amount to actually stress test the position, putting just that little extra buffer there to make sure you can pay for the mortgage in the worst case scenario. Just to give you an example, a couple with 2 kids, perhaps $130,000 of household income, can borrow around $830,000. This is on top of whatever deposits you might have. So quite easily, you might be able to buy something in that $1 million range as a new build. That will give you a lot of options on the market at the moment. Do keep in mind, if you have 2 children and you've got childcare expense, this is going to lower that amount. So if you had $1,000 of childcare expense, for example, every month, this could drop the borrowing down to just around $670,000. The $1,000 childcare expense could change your borrowing by $160,000. So it's wise to plan out your expense well in advance with a mortgage advisor before you decide you want to go ahead and buy a property. so you can put yourself in the best position to maximize your borrowing power. And lastly, how do you get pre-approved for a new build? I would usually advise clients to get a pre-approval just 3 months prior to the CCC being issued, or a lot closer when the construction's completed and about to issue that legal documents from the council. This is because new builds tends to take a while to complete, and in most cases I've seen will take more than 12 months from when the client initially declared unconditional. What I do recommend though is a borrowing assessment with a mortgage advisor. Now, assuming that the credit score is solid, this borrowing assessment should be accurate and should be sufficient. New builds are usually a lot easier to approve than an existing property because they have a newly issued CCC from the council to meet the latest building standards. So the one thing you should be aware of are apartments that are maybe slightly smaller. Anything below 50 square meters, I would definitely check with the mortgage advisor well in advance, because a lot of those apartments have less lending options. So you might not be able to borrow as much and you might have to come up with a much larger deposit up front. So check with your mortgage advisors on constraints on different types of apartments as well. Now, some people are worried about their financial position changing prior to the construction finishing, so they want a pre-approval. Unfortunately, a pre-approval will always have a condition on it that says it is only valid if your financial position don't change for the worse. Even though some banks might give you a pre-approval on a new build for up to 12 months, it will unfortunately not shield you from changes in your financial circumstances. So how you negotiate the conditions on your contract is going to be crucial, and this is going to be covered in part 6 of our 6-part series to new builds, where we explore a little bit further on due diligence and some of the clauses that you can have on your contracts. Until then, I'll see you guys in the next video.